Morning, everybody. I'm super excited to welcome Michelle Ragusa-McBain. Most of you know her, but for those of you that you're coming to know her today, Michelle, I'd love to have you take a minute and introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Sugata. I'm such excited to be here with you and your audience today. I've been in the technology channel for the past 20 years. I stumbled upon it by accident and actually entered the Cisco Global Academy where I started as an engineer. So I know many of your listeners are engineers. So excited for that journey. And then for the rest of the time, I did a lot of different things within the channel. I spent 12 years at Cisco, really moving around from sales, commercial, and enterprise, moving into telco service provider, public sector, and distribution. I then went to Office Depot during the CompuCom acquisition, so $1 billion to reimagine the company as a tech services company. And that was a really exciting part of that movement, really being part of a transformation really fired me up. And then I joined my good friend and former colleague, Janet Shines, in the JS group for a bit during COVID, which we all know, helping a lot of vendors and partners around the world with their social selling and digital marketing during really challenging times. I then joined Cisco again, leading their global SMB for managed service providers. And then I went to SonicWall most recently as the global channel chief. And right now, I'm excited that I'll be launching a very new initiative shortly.
That is amazing. That is amazing. So it's rare to get someone of your diverse background who has seen it pretty much the entire evolution of channel becoming ecosystem. So let's dial back, if we may, about a couple of decades ago. Tell us a little bit from through your lenses when you started, you started with Cisco. What did the channel look like? Because Cisco is the one that kind of really pulled the industry together, formed this notion of networks which connected to each other, became the cloud, and where we know we're today, right? So tell us a little bit, what did the channel look like then?
Well, one of my favorite stories, and I don't know if you know this or not, but I like to say that the internet was based upon a love story because Sandy Lerner and Len Bozak were both going to Stanford University and they wanted to talk to each other and they were in two disparate buildings. And so they were creating the first sort of internet protocol where they could talk to each other in two different and route those conversations between the buildings. And that was the fledgling seed of the internet as we know it, really, in a lot of ways. And so I was very excited. I mean, Cisco today has 83,000 employees. I was employee 1,485 to give you some perspective. So it was already a very large company, but really a lot of momentum happened in those years. I think they had 286 acquisitions over the 40 years that they were a company. And I was able to see a lot of different transitions from the growth of smart cities and IoT from just the core networking that they began with and switching and routing, the ability for them to look at telepresence and these virtual communication tools like WebEx, and then moving and transitioning now obviously to cybersecurity with the acquisitions of OpenDNS and Meraki and routing and security, as well as most recently Splunk. So seeing that transition, you can see a lot of things. You can see how I like to say with a lot of other people, the only thing consistent and constant in technology is change. So we're always adapting and growing. But I also think that cybersecurity is more top of mind than ever before. We've uploaded for the last 40 years all of our content into the cloud, all of this digital proprietary information. And so, how do we keep it safe and protected? And as next gen AI continues to iterate and make us more smart and holistically easier for us to do business and, learn and play and shop and educate and all of those things, it's also giving cyber criminals an advantage in the dark web, deep fakes, and many other areas as well. So it's an exciting time, but also a time where we really have to be cognizant of how do we lean in.
So I want to go back and double click on that, 1,400 employee sort of time frame, right? What did the channel or the ecosystem look like then through your lenses?
Well, I would say that most of the partners we worked with would have referred to themselves as VARs. Cisco's always been very channel friendly, along with a lot of other great vendor companies that we know in the ecosystem. Partner first was that mentality. I think the companies that went direct really lost an opportunity because if you weren't selling with partners, they were going to sell against you with your competitors. So partner first has been a great mentality for many vendors in our ecosystem, but what those vendors refer to themselves as and how do they perceive themselves and how do they do business has really changed. I think that a lot of the VARs are now redefine themselves, reimagine their business model to be managed services, especially as a lot of companies, not only Cisco, but HPE, Dell, IBM, et cetera, so on, all go subscription consumption, right? So we're seeing this monthly recurring revenue, the stickiness with our customers and the vendor partner relationship, and the ability for us to do more services together. But it's not just one partner anymore or one vendor. There's a lot of things that are in the stacks of the partners. There's a lot of vendor solutions. In cybersecurity alone, there's 6,500 companies that say that they're a cybersecurity vendor. So there could be a lot of noise and clutter for partners out there. And I think that, it's very important for you to have the right synergies and the right relationship in the terms of the people that are going to influence the customers that you are trying to sell with and to.
So let's go back a little bit, and we'll come, today's date pretty quickly. But when you think about the evolution, what you just called about VARs, they moved into managed services, then they moved into managed security services.
Yeah.
So vendors, like, we're a tiny little vendor at that time called SonicWall,
Mhm.
and we're in like awe with Cisco's command line protocol, because the VARs, they just loved it. They would go in and fire up the terminal, and we were trying to compete with the $199, $299, $599 boxes, and the whole goal was simplicity. But a lot of the partners didn't like that because it was too simple to put in, and they wanted to build infrastructure sort of in their own way. So if you think about through that transition, not just the acquisition, because Cisco built a very diverse ecosystem, right? So if you have to kind of explain the evolution a little bit through your lenses, like, how did they pull this thing together? Not just acquisition, but this plethora of different types of resellers, VARs, distributors, solution providers, and how did they orchestrate that over the last 20 years?
Yeah. Well, when I started, I remember selling chassis 6509 switches, giant switches in server rooms, right? And now I also worked at SonicWall, as you know. And so the idea of the two acquisitions that SonicWall most recently made, if you're aware, are for Banyan Security, which was zero trust ZTNA, so that you can protect yourself no matter where in the world you are, whether you're in an office or you're at home or on the train or anywhere else you might be, or for managed security services so that you can protect yourself 24 by 7 with the SOC as a service. So these things are not things that would have even existed in the realm of rationale back in the day, right? When SonicWall was most commonly known for firewalls. And so I think that a lot of the transition and the ability for us as companies to understand as this motion has evolved, the partners have various routes to market, right? And I just mentioned, for example, VARs and MSPs, but there's many, many different partner types in the ecosystem. ISVs, global system integrators, the cloud service providers, all of these different components that have their niche specialty and expertise. One of the things I used to ask partners when I was a consultant originally, I would say to them, what do you sell and who do you sell to? And they say, I sell all the things to all the people in all the world. And I'm like, well, that's a very broad goal. It's really hard to do a peanut butter spread of your talent and expertise. So if we really laser focus in on where people have their superpowers, I'll call it, you'll see certain partners are great in certain maybe industries or geographies or verticals, and they might have different skill sets and expertise, and you might need multiple partners to help you complete that transaction. And as Jay, my husband, obviously at Canalys, will say, there's 7 partners that will touch a deal. And so that's one of the most interesting dynamics, is to say we're not working with one person anymore as a vendor. You have 7 people influencing, and it could be professional services. It could be an accounting firm. It could be a marketing firm. It could be a law firm. Everybody is a tech company first.
So if we come back today, and I'm going to pick like maybe 2 different sizes of organization, because that's pretty much our customer base that listen to this. So you take large enterprise with multiple product lines, hardware, software, services, right? Let's call it sort of a classic large enterprise, globally distributed. And then we'll come into mid-market, maybe 2 or 3 product lines, highly focused, few $100 million in revenue, right? So walk us through, and both of them are going through the channel at the moment and looking forward. If they're trying to put together, a chief partner officer and his or her offices together, setting up and designing the organization, how would you go about approaching that?
So, the most important thing, I'm actually also recently enrolled in a Wharton Chief Revenue Officer program course. And what I love about this course is, as a global channel chief, my role was to report into our Chief Revenue Officer. And you use the term Chief Partner Officer. There's a lot of terms that define what we do, right? The go to market person. And depending on the size of the vendor, you might have many people. Or in a smaller vendor, you might have one or two people that wear many hats. And so you have to know the dynamic of who you're trying to, the persona of who you're trying to connect with and sell to. So that first starts with knowing who your end customers really are, your target audience. Once you've identified the needs that you're filling, you will identify the people that have the expertise in that area and probably have the more close relationships for scalability purposes with that specific group of people. It's very hard, especially at large vendors, as you grow, to stay connected to all of your partners, right? You always know the 80-20% rule, that 80% of the business comes from the top 20 partners. But that doesn't mean that the medium sector of that triangle or the mass amount of partners at the end don't require attention, don't require the ability for you to have that relationship and interest in them. So, how can one person have that? Well, I think it also depends on your scope of work. Are you predominantly in North America? Are you an international company, also in EMEA or LATAM or Asia Pac? You will notice that in a lot of the other geographies, specifically Europe, Asia, and Latin America, that distributors are really the focal point of these partner relationships, these customer relationships a lot of times. And so if you have that connection point and a strong transactional relationship, or more importantly strategic relationship with the distributors in those areas, you're going to be more profitable and drive more revenue as a company. In North America, it's a little bit more unique, I would say, because you have the ability to really scale both through distributors, both kind of the traditional Ingram Micro, Tech Data, Cynics, the DNH, et cetera, Arrow. And then you have kind of the more up and coming Pax8, Born in the Cloud service, who don't refer to themselves as distributors per se, but have kind of a similar motion. And so you have to look at not only that 7 layers of distribution, then there's also the telco service provider space, right? If you're looking at a lot of the partners at SonicWall would also be in the telco space, same with Cisco, same with others, Juniper and Fortinet. So looking at the agents and the people that were formerly master agents, but those tech distributors, that is another motion that you have to have if you're looking at that route to market. If you're going to be more in the cloud space, then you obviously need more of the marketplaces, ISVs, hyperscalers, that route to market. And who are those partners? And the traditional way of connecting with them is very different, right? You can't be locked in an ivory tower. You have to be fishing where the fish are. Where are your partners going? Who do they listen to? Who influences them? And what is that ecosystem pond that you need to be present in order to get your company out there into their minds and their recommendations, because they are the trusted advisor to your customers.
So let's take our common example, right? Experiences. I think both of us joined at two different life cycle for SonicWall. When I joined, it was $100 million in revenue. We had lots of partners, but we really didn't have any structured channel program to recruit them, train them, enable them. We had a partner portal that was built out of Siebel. People could barely log in. And you come today, SonicWall has grown into a multi-billion-dollar level, very diverse ecosystem. Keeping aside the logo, but if I just take the revenue and the complexity of yesterday and today, can you kind of walk us through, if I'm a $200 million company, do I start like where I started 20 years ago, or I'm dealing with a whole different level of complexity today, despite my size?
I think that the complexity is there regardless of your size, but I do think that you can help navigate it a bit more if you have additional revenue or resources to scale that. So to be frank, I think that in order to have the right motion, and we talked about this a bit before we started, it was sort of that local roadshow, that local presence, something that you all are doing at ZINFI. Understanding at the grassroots level where your partners are and getting to them. We know that there's a lot of events in our ecosystem today. That's it's a superfluous amount. I think there's close to 365 that were documented, and there's more if you count local road shows. That's one per day. And frankly, we don't have enough time, money, or resources to be omnipresent. So, how do you get into the right motions and conversations at the right time? And so, scalability and investment in that is very critical. Understanding how am I going to find the right partners or customers and educate them, especially when you're going through something where you're reimagining. Recently, Cisco came out with the logo not too long ago that Carrie Palin launched, which is we're not your granddaddy's tech company anymore. SonicWall through another reimagination. We're not a firewall company anymore. I think for a lot of the companies that are born in the cloud, that are new, the Huntresses and the Threat Lockers, it's a lot easier to create your logo because you don't have like a politician. There's no past experience. There's no history. It's just kind of a fresh start. But if you have been around, you have a benefit of being a trusted brand and having a lot of loyal people for many years. But maybe you upset some people along the way too. And so you have to overcome some of those obstacles as well. And I think that as you go through that motion of who you are as a company and what you'd like to work through and who you'd like to connect to, then you really need to make sure that you are showing up not only at events, but through the webinars, through the magazines, through the podcasts, through the Reddits, through the social media platforms, all of these omnipresent places.
So I want to kind of take your framework that you just walked through. What I'm hearing from you is, yes, it's more complex today, but there are a lot more opportunities. If you can figure out how to orchestrate, you can scale really fast. So let's take that as a foundation. And we've been talking to Jay a lot about this whole word called partner operations, partner ops. And I did a podcast with Antonio Caridad from Tricentis, because he's kind of driving there. And he said, it's really a nascent function. There is no guiding principles in there. And that's the discussion Jay and I have had, is that if we try to take a framework like a revenue ops or sales ops or marketing ops, and let's say we break it down to a few parts: target, recruit, onboard, enable, co-market, co-sell, incentivize, and accelerate. So if you take sort of a mid-market company with the multitudes of partners, right, that are trying to grow in hundreds of millions of dollars, where should I start because that's a lot from an ops perspective, and most partner organizations are underinvested. So
Yeah.
if you are coming in and advising a decent velocity company trying to put a scale program together within that partner ops framework, where should they start?
And in this example, just to clarify, do they have a partner program or any partners at all at this point?
Yes,
Or
they
is it
do. Yes, they
just
do. Yes, they do.
okay? So I can talk to this as well because I helped relaunch SonicWall's Secure First program. That was one of my really important initiatives in my time there. So the first thing is, I think, well, Bob Van Kirk does an excellent job of calling this outside in listening. And I've done this for years. I just never called it by that name. What does that mean? It means, are you listening to your partner's feedback? What's working? What's not? What can I do better? Very simply put. And having everybody in the company, not just the channel, not just sales, but engineering, training and enablement, marketing, product, come together and understand the needs of your partners for them to be successful. What's in it for them? There's a lot of choice. We know that. Why would they choose to work with you? So, partner profitability, great products, and support in a symbiotic relationship that elevates both companies is what they're looking for. And so that motion takes a lot of effort. The first thing that you have to do, I think every company should have an advisory council if you don't have one today, meaning you take not just your key partners, not just your yes partners, but the partners that will give you real, tangible feedback, and even maybe a partner that has left you, and understand why. The other thing that we did was we partnered with CRN and we did a total partner experience survey. We sent that out. This was the first time that we sent it out globally, not just in North America. We sent it to everyone around the world, and we had in-person and phone interviews as well as a survey form that was quite extensive. It took about half an hour to complete. And that was a big ask. But why? Because we really wanted to tackle all of those core areas. What can we do better in product? What can we do better in training and enablement? What can we do better in a sales marketing motion for revenue share, market development funds, all of these other areas where you're going to help reinvest back into your business to grow? And then taking those two things as well as local and global representation, we brought back the Peak Conference. So we had that in North America, EMEA, and Asia Pac. And then also brought back the ability for us to show up in a lot of the watering holes with these partners. And at booth or breakout sessions or keynotes, we would present, but then also seek feedback from the masses. We took all of that into place. And what ended up coming out of that was a brand new program. And so Secure First basically took whether you were going to buy a point product, like I want to buy a firewall or a switch or an access point, or if you're going to sell in recurring revenue, I want to become a managed service provider partner. It didn't matter how you procured, you would earn and grow. That was very important because the motion of the partners of SonicWall had changed. They didn't want to get, profitable on one part of their business, but not the other. And we wanted them to grow both parts of their business. So that was very important, changing the way they earned money with us and how they changed their tiers with us.
That's amazing. So I want to go back to Partner Advisory Council. I had a conversation with Mary Catherine Wilson, who's CMO at Future Tech now, and she came from Dell, and we had a little bit of commonality there. And we were discussing a lot about importance of Partner Advisory Council. And she said, when she was at Dell, she would run 4 or 5 different types. So I would like to kind of hear from you for this mid-market company that's kind of trying to grow and scale, has partner playbooks in place, now trying to bring in Partner Advisory Council. Can you kind of walk us through how to frame those, both, because those are difficult conversation if you really want to make progress, right?
Yeah.
How do you bring in these founders? Most of them tend to be with strong personality, is a room full of people.
Yeah.
Who should be in that room? How is it constructed? How it's run through? How do you follow up? What is the mechanics of that?
Yeah. The most important thing, and I was very critical of this, was we needed to have equal weight in the room as them. If we're asking their C-level founders, presidents to leave their busy business, which makes them money, to come fly to Florida, which is where we had this event for 2 days, then we needed our company to show up in full force, all of the executives. So our CEO, our CRO, our head of product, our head of engineering, our CMO, our head of customer support, also very important, and our channel chief. And so our VP of sales, all of us were in that room. So we were putting skin in the game. This is an opportunity for you to share your opinions, share your voices, and tell us what's working, what's not. So we would have 3 virtual meetings to prepare. Each meeting would be very simple, run in accordance. We would have people introduced to each other so they were familiar with each other before they got there. We'd welcome conversation. But I will tell you honestly, you have no better conversation than when you're in person in a room together. So we would still do that. So we would have a cadence, we would have a presenter. The role of that presenter was not to talk for the whole time. They were to solicit feedback from the audience. So this is what we're thinking of doing. Not that we launched it, not that it's really live and you have no chance to change it. This is our thought process. Are we on the right path? Yes or no? What would you change? Is this pricing motion right? Is this, and they're not all going to agree, but we take in that feedback of a random sampling of diverse people, of different size companies, of different locations, and we take that feedback into the shaping of how we're going to transition our go-to market. And that really was the critical piece. So I'd say no more than 10, maybe under 15 if you really want to get complicated. But you know what you were just saying, too many cooks in the kitchen. You're not going to get all of the information. And you have to give room for people to speak. Not everyone's an extrovert, even if you're a founder of a company. So how do you allow them to share? And that means that the people that are presenting have to do it with an open mind because it's their baby too. And they may not feel comfortable getting negative feedback, but that's what makes us better as a company, is to get the right feedback that can create change.
So let's take that and kind of, scale that company in size multifolds. Let's go to a Cisco level size, right? So you went from a few hundred million to a few billion where you can orchestrate, pull the C levels together. How do you run a partner advisory council when you're multi-product, multi-region, and multi-billion dollar level with thousands of partner ops, partner folks in the field, in the ground, in these different regions?
Surprisingly, very similarly. And also, I didn't mention this, but this was not just a North American council. And we didn't just have a sales council, we had technical councils and sales councils. And I think that's very important. In some of the other theaters, we had merged the two. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. I do know that a lot of partners may wear the technical and revenue driving hats of their organization, but their careabouts are very different. One is looking for margins and acquisitions, profitability, the ability to get their company acquired. The other is looking for the speeds and feeds and what's the latest and shiny new tech. So your time is limited and you want to be able to get the most of each of those meetings with what they care most about. So I think that's part of it. Identifying what the mission of that meeting will be like. Is it going to be more technical? Is it going to be more profitable driven? Is it going to be more marketing driven? And you can have as many types of meetings as you want. We would have various people, as I mentioned, present to them on different topics and solicit this feedback, but it didn't necessarily mean that that was going to be all year long. The one thing we always had is our PM to talk about the future of what we were doing, whether it was building it, partnering, or acquiring it.
So let's come today, and you're incredibly connected with multiple types of companies of various size, whether it's in networking, whether it's storage, whether it's security, whether it's an application, whether it's data center. So if you are in those partner advisory council today, if you have to pick one or two themes that you think you're hearing, what are those things you're hearing?
Yes, I would say the most important thing, everyone's talking security. I mean, you cannot get away from security. If you're not talking about security, you're probably missing a huge opportunity. I would say that's the giant elephant in the room because there's so much opportunity and there's multiple layers of security, there's multiple partnership opportunities. If that is not your expertise, or if you're not a security vendor, perhaps you consider, who do you partner with, what do you need to build, or should you acquire somebody that is. I think that that is a huge opportunity that needs to be tackled and addressed. In terms of the people that are already there, how do you differentiate yourself from the competition? I think that's a very important thing. We talked about over 6,000 companies globally. There's a lot of people that are talking about it, new companies forming every day. How do you stand out from the crowd? And I think that that's one thing that every company should be thinking. What's in it for your partners? What's in it for your customers? It's not just about you. If you're only thinking about your company from your perspective, there's a lot of companies that might do what you do. So how are you going to translate that to the needs of your partners? I talked a little bit and I didn't finish this thought, but market development funds is something that we started doing. What is that exactly? It just means that the more you sell with us, the more you earn. Not because of a request, not proposal based, but because you've earned it. And what that means is you can reinvest that money back into your business. And a lot of times I started partnering with really amazing companies such as Vendasta and others who can help our partners with what they need to be successful. And that was something that changed our whole trajectory of 8% utilization to 34% utilization at Cisco in a matter of a quarter. And that's because partners didn't want to just, do a golf event or something like that. Maybe they were doing something that was evaluating their website and their content and their SEO and how they're going to show up in the local community. Maybe it is partnering with Chamber of Commerce and having us as their vendor show up with them and not get technical, because not all their customers are technical. Maybe we would, maybe we wouldn't, but really talking about the trends that we're seeing in the industry.
I'm going to come back to the trend, but I do want to do a little sidebar on this,
Sure.
three-letter word called MDF,
Yeah.
because it is a very mysterious world. It means different things to different companies, different channel chiefs, different partners. Talk to us a little bit. What is really happening with MDF? Because, Jay talks about this 28 moments in the customer journey, rewarding or engaging with the partner across the journey. A lot of companies are going through a point-based accrual system. We see in our, as a solution provider, from a PRM perspective, the needs are very, very diverse. Do you see one or two or three ways of the word MDF is evolving, or like, where is it today?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with the reimagining of the programs, right? So when I talk about traditional programs, that's sort of your bronze, silver, gold, whatever you want, platinum levels that you've seen for the last 30, 40 years. When you start evolving into what Microsoft has just done, what Cisco has just done, what others will be doing shortly, you're going to see a completely different type of program where your skills and your expertise and the points that you're allotted are very different than they would have been traditionally. And that means that you might have a partner that got paid just because they got the order, sort of not doing a lot of work in that deal. And then you might have a partner that helps you go to market, helps you do the social selling, helps you organize this, helps you from cradle to grave. And they would allot more points in that scheme of those moments where they're touching that customer. And I think that's a bit well deserved. I've heard mixed motions and feelings from partners on that, whether they like it or whether they don't. Probably the ones that don't like it are the ones that are upset that they're no longer getting it easier than they would have. But I think for the partners that have been doing all that work all along, they're going to be really happy with the fact that now they're getting compensated differently. And I think that there's a benefit to that because as a vendor, you only have so many dollars to spend. And I know you don't have a huge partner audience listening, but for any partner that might be listening, use the money. Like vendors, if you don't use it, you lose it. And so that is a huge opportunity. You don't want to just put up money every quarter and not get it accrued, not get it taken. And a big reason that partners don't like to use that money is because we ask them, just one thought, to pay for it up front. And then once they don't have a lot of money, all of them. Obviously, the largest partners do, but the smaller mid-sized ones may not. And so they don't even know if they'll get the ROI to prove that they're able to do this. So there is a dynamic where you want to make sure that we are compensating partners in the way they deserve.
So let's take the word market and then let's take the word development. And you
Sure.
talked about one of the major change or opportunities in the cybersecurity space, whether you're in it or not, you have to embrace that. Let's also talk about the two-letter word called AI, which I know you're very passionate about. So talk to us a little bit from a market development activity motion-wise, because everybody's paying attention to those words right today. So if you want to grab attention in this fractured sort of media landscape, and you're trying to put programs together with a partner, what are the logical ways to fund programs, build program? What are end users are interested about when it comes to AI, when it comes to security? Are you seeing certain trends or activities?
I think there's huge interest, and I don't even think we've scratched the surface of all the ways that we can utilize generative AI moving forward. Obviously, AI has been around for many years, but the way that it's become put on steroids right now, the way that it's accessible in all areas of business. I had the privilege and opportunity of sitting with many leaders in the CRN's forum. And we had, all of these people from HPE and Dell and IBM and Cisco and myself, and just sitting in a room talking about how each of these companies are going to use AI. And I think at the end of the day, it's not just product, it's not just marketing, but obviously we know that that makes it a lot easier. It's not just customer support, but obviously there's huge opportunities to scale and be more efficient and effective in responsiveness when time is money for your customers there. It's not just enablement, but the idea that everybody, whether it's your own company or your partners, learn at different levels, learn at different speeds or feeds, and you can't grade everybody equally. So if you have an opportunity to hone in and train this person a little bit more in this area and this person a little bit more in these skills, then you can actually laser focus how you educate and train and enable the masses. I think AI is going to do incredible things for vendors and for partners and for our customers, and we're just scratching the surface.
Are you seeing traction in a specific area and specific program, specific vendor that it's not just the hype word, it's actually there, helping the partners to generate more, transactions, make them more profitable? Have you seen evidence of that?
Yeah, I'll give a special shout out to somebody who I think is doing incredible things. Bhakti from Big Spring is has John Chambers, former CEO, and Wendy Barr, former channel chief of Cisco, on her advisory board. She's working with enablement programs with Google and Cisco and doing incredible things on how you have this iterative training where it's almost scholastically sports gamification, really looking at saying, okay, we see a need here, and then going back in and then training on different areas at different times. I think that's an incredible technology. And then 10x Exchange is doing really cool things as well. Protap is doing great things with AI that complements all of the PRMs that are out there to help with enablement and training. So there's really interesting conversations and dialogues that are happening and massive amounts of tools that are at our fingertips. Will they I think it's a race to the top. I think there's so many great things we're going to find out in the next few years who the real winners of that game is.
I have so many questions, but I need to focus because we have a few minutes left. I do want to talk a little bit about distribution, where distribution is going in the age of AI. I do want to talk about diversity, and I do want to talk about your own journey. So let's start with distribution first. You have had incredible experience. You have been on multiple boards, multiple organizations. Tell us a little bit what used to be, what it is now, and where do you think it'll be 3 to 5 years from now?
It's been a fantastic experience seeing the evolution of distribution. So I recall Julie Clark, who's no longer with Cisco, but she led our customer support for all of our relationship teams with our distributors and all of our large key partners. And she tapped me on the shoulder for an opportunity to support Ingram. And she said, distribution is the future. I want you to be a part of this rocket ship. And it truly is. I mean, talk about scale, talk about the ability for them to have a one to many in incredible ways. All of the history that they have, right? When we talk about historical data between all of the distributors, they touch all the partners and all the customers in all the world, I believe, because most partners are not just going directly through vendors. I think the disruption that happens is when we start adding complexity to the mix with marketplaces, with other ways that people can procure things. I don't think that it'll be either or. I think it'll just be a very interesting mix. And I think there's a huge opportunity where you see companies that are disruptive, like Pax8 in this space, kind of calling attention to other needs that the traditional distributors might not have had, but to reimagine themselves as well. So you see Ingram with Cloud Blue, Tech Data launching their version as well. And so I think the great part about competition is it allows us to redefine what great looks like every year. And not becoming complacent is the best way for us to help our partners continue to accelerate in their journey with us.
So that's amazing. So thinking about distribution, that is the ultimate democracy. Everybody participate. Nothing could be more diverse. So maybe we can take that as a segue because you have been very, very passionate about diversity, about inclusion, right? I know you're also involved into STEM education. You have two little, beautiful daughters. I have an 18-year-old that's about to graduate. So speak from a woman perspective, speak from a diverse leader perspective who has risen through the rank and speak through this distribution, which is the ultimate representation of this diverse channel system. How do you see diversity is evolving? How has it evolved? Where is it going? Hopes, thoughts, fears, aspirations.
It's very a passionate topic for me. So I'll rewind to go forward. My grandparents, three or four of them, immigrated to this country. My one grandmother was Native American. So I am Caucasian, I am Latina, I am Native American. And for me, my family was very salt of the earth. They came from very humble beginnings. I was the first in my family to go to college. I was the first in my family to get an MBA, and I'm the first in my family to work in technology. And I've been here for 20 years, and I don't plan on going anywhere. I love technology. I love that we are truly changing the way the world lives and works and plays and learns. And we continue to do that. We keep the good guys safe and protected in when we're in cybersecurity. We evolve our imaginations with AI. We allow the opportunities for smart cities that we've been talking about for all these years, but our homes and our offices and our communities are becoming more and more intelligent through technology. And I just recently spoke, as you know, at my daughter's school, both of them, fifth grade, third grade, the toughest critics. Spoken to 5,000 person audiences, but talking to third graders about what tech is after the doctor and firefighter is a little bit more challenging. And what I love to do is tell them how tech is in everything we do. Every industry in the world, every part of the world, every geography of the world has something to do with technology, the ability to make the world better. I feel that there has been, unfortunately, a stagnation and decline in women entering careers in technology and in women leaving careers in technology. And that's very disappointing. I've sat on the board of CRN. I've been a part of the Global Technology Industry Association, formerly CompTIA, as their chairman of Advancing Women in Tech. I sit in the Florida Alliance of Channel Women, the National Women in Technology. So I'm very prevalent in these communities. How do we attract, maintain, retain, and accelerate and promote these women into careers in tech? And it's not an easy thing. And not just women, diverse candidates, people from different countries, people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, people that are introverted and extroverted, people with abilities or disabilities that are really an ability. And how do we lean in? Our former nanny, for example, was deaf. And when COVID happened, she struggled so much with people that turned their cameras off and she couldn't read their lips and she couldn't understand without subtitles. Understanding that until we put something, our ideas and our hearts and our minds in other people's shoes, being the only is very challenging. Being the only female leader, being the only person of color, being the only person that's different. We want to make sure that people feel accepted, that they not only get invited to the dance, but they get a seat at the table and we ask them to be a part of the dialogue and conversation to help make the company and the products, the marketing, the sales, the support better, more efficient, more effective. And there are tangible, very tangible results that come from this. We've seen study after study that show increased profitability, increased employee retention, increased customer satisfaction. So these are real benefits that come from this purpose. And I believe that if you look across the aisle and everybody thinks and looks and acts like you're doing it wrong. We need to make sure that we are inclusive as a company, as a culture, as a society, and that will inevitably make us that much more better as a society.
And that's the ultimate definition of a true ecosystem. It's biologically diverse. It's diverse in every possible way. But I do want to take the last couple of minutes and have the current Michelle talk to the Michelle from 20 years ago and give her some advice how to navigate in life, kind of looking forward, not looking back, based on all the things that you know today. Because I'd love to share that clip with my daughter.
Oh, I would love that. And I'd love to meet her if she ever wants a mentor. So that's part of my challenge. I mentioned I didn't have a lot of mentorship growing up. I had an amazing family. They were very caring. They were very passionate. A lot of them were entrepreneurs. They remind me of a lot of the service providers that I've met in my journey and cloud service providers that I've met in my journey. But I do believe that mentorship matters, representation matters. And I say, I didn't know anybody who knew anybody that worked in technology. That's true. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I had one man who reached out to me at an alumni event. I was working on Wall Street at the time. I came from a single mother, so I had to work 2 or 3 jobs, even with the presidential scholarship and grant to put myself through university and school. And this man asked me, what do I want to be? What did I study? And I talked to him. I told him I was global business and marketing with a minor in peace studies. I didn't know. I lived in New York. Was I going to work for the United Nations? Was I going to work in global business? Was I going to work in finance? I had all of these ideas and not a lot of direction. And he told me about the program in Cisco. And that moment, that flap of the butterfly wing truly changed the trajectory of my life. Because in our conversation, I just talked to him recently and it made me tear up because I became a whole different person because of that one investment of conversation and mentorship that he had with me. So my advice to anyone listening is have as many mentors as you can. Mentors, champions, sponsors. What does that mean? It means I don't just mean you want to talk to people that you aspire to be like. That's one type of mentor. You need to be dedicated with checking in, whether it's quarterly or monthly, depending on the time you both have to put into it. But you need to make that commitment on the calendar. You need to know what you want to achieve and how you're going to get there. And so a champion will tell you, you need to fix these things. You need to do this differently. You need to be a little bit better. And a sponsor, this is probably the most important thing, is going to go to bat for you when you're not in the room. Because most decisions that are made, most hirings that are made happen when you're not in the room. For the last 10 years of my career, all of the roles that I got were tapped on my shoulder saying, I think you should pursue this, or we have an opportunity that would be perfect for you. So and so recommended you. And so I do believe that you want to make sure that you have various people. And there was one important call out. Sheryl Sandberg in leanin.org did a study. 73% of men said they felt uncomfortable mentoring women after the Me Too movement. And that's terrible news, because if men are typically in positions of leadership and power, statistically, they're the CEOs or C-level, then we need them to grow a bench of strong, powerful women to help take on that next level of relationships. And so not just women, but diverse candidates again. So how do we get a diverse bench? How do we invest in them? And how do we help that next generation of youth? That's where we're going to see a brighter tomorrow.
Well, with that amazing reflection and advice, we're going to wrap up today. We're out of time. I'd love to have you back. I'm super excited that you're going to be at the panel in Tampa. Look
Thank
forward
you.
to meeting you in person. But Michelle, thank you very much.
It was my pleasure. And I look forward to meeting you in person as well, and meeting all your audience. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to help.
And we look forward to that big announcement that's coming pretty soon. So
Yes,
thank you.
it is.